ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that Port Charles is standing on the edge of a new catastrophe, and this time the danger is not coming from a random enemy hiding in the shadows. It is being born from grief, sharpened by humiliation, and fueled by a man who no longer sees any reason to restrain the darkest parts of himself. Marco's death does not simply wound Sidwell. It tears open something far more unstable inside him, something raw, obsessive, and ravenous. For a man who has spent so much of his life mastering fear, exploiting weakness, and treating other people's pain as collateral damage, this loss is different because it is personal. It is not just the loss of a son. It is the loss of control, the collapse of certainty, the unbearable realization that someone managed to strike at the center of his world and leave him alive long enough to feel every second of it. That kind of pain does not humble a man like Sidwell. It mutates him. It turns mourning into fixation, sorrow into rage, and rage into a plan so ruthless that Port Charles may not recognize itself by the time he is finished. At first, Sidwell's grief looks almost human. That is what makes it dangerous. He is quieter than usual, more withdrawn, with a stillness that feels less like peace and more like a loaded weapon waiting for the slightest pressure. The people around him may mistake that silence for shock, but inside him something much uglier is taking shape. Marco's death becomes an echo chamber in his mind, replaying every warning he ignored, every weakness he underestimated, every betrayal he failed to detect until it was too late. He begins to see enemies everywhere. Every glance feels suspicious. Every alliance feels temporary. Every apology sounds hollow. The grief does not soften him. It convinces him that mercy was always a mistake. In his mind, Sonny becomes the embodiment of everything that has been taken from him. Whether Sonny directly pulled the strings or not almost stops mattering, because Sidwell needs his rage to have a face, a body, a symbol he can destroy. Sonny is powerful, protected, deeply rooted in Port Charles, and that makes him the perfect target. To Sidwell, eliminating Sonny is no longer just revenge. It is restoration. It is proof that no one can touch his bloodline and continue breathing comfortably in the same city. But even a man driven by obsession knows when brute force is not enough. Sidwell understands that Sonny cannot be brought down by impulsive violence alone. Sonny has survived too much, seen too much, and built too many defenses to be attacked in a simple, predictable way. If Sidwell wants Sonny destroyed quickly, completely, and publicly, he needs more than fury. He needs access. He needs information. He needs someone who understands the emotional fault lines Sonny has spent years trying to conceal. That is where Ava steps in, and the shift begins to feel almost inevitable. Ava is not drawn to Sidwell because he is safe. She is drawn to him because he is dangerous in a way she understands intimately. Beneath his controlled exterior, she sees a man unraveling, a man at war with his own pain, a man whose need for revenge is so intense that it is almost seductive in its honesty. For Ava, who has spent years surviving in the ruins of other people's power games, that kind of emotional nakedness is magnetic. It awakens both her empathy and her ambition, and those two impulses are far more explosive together than either of them would be alone. Ava initially tells herself that she is only getting close to Sidwell because it is useful. That is the lie she clings to, because the truth is far more complicated and far more dangerous. The truth is that she recognizes something of herself in him. She knows what it means to lose, to be cornered, to be judged for every desperate move made in the name of survival. She knows what it is to carry grief until it curdles into resentment. She knows what it is to mistake vengeance for clarity. And when Sidwell lowers his guard just enough for her to glimpse the devastation underneath, Ava feels something far deeper than curiosity. She feels chosen. Not in a romantic sense at first, but in a strategic one. Sidwell begins to lean on her, not because he trusts easily, but because his grief has stripped away the patience required for careful distance. He needs someone beside him who does not frighten easily, who will not moralize, who can translate emotion into action. Ava becomes that person with frightening speed. What makes their connection so potent is that it is built on mutual hunger. Sidwell wants retribution and Ava wants leverage. Sidwell wants Sonny broken and Ava wants Avery back. What begins as emotional proximity soon evolves into a calculated alliance, but the brilliance of it is that neither one can fully separate business from desire. Ava sees in Sidwell the possibility of becoming untouchable again, not merely protected, but elevated. She has spent too long being forced into defensive positions, too long reacting to Sonny's power instead of reshaping the board herself. With Sidwell, she sees an opening. If she helps him weaponize his grief, if she guides his fury toward Sonny with precision instead of chaos, she can use the resulting damage to advance her own cause. Sonny's instability, his dangerous life, his endless enemies, his murky moral history, all of it can be turned into a case against him where Avery is concerned. Ava does not need Sonny dead to win. She only needs him compromised, reckless, and surrounded by enough darkness that a court could be convinced Avery is safer away from him. Sidwell, however, is not interested in winning partial victories. He wants destruction. Ava understands that, and instead of resisting it, she begins to shape it. That is where the real terror begins. Sidwell and Ava do not become powerful simply because they are cunning. They become powerful because they feed each other's most destructive instincts, while making those instincts sound reasonable. Ava gives Sidwell a more elegant language for revenge, one wrapped in legal pressure, emotional manipulation, and carefully timed chaos. Sidwell gives Ava something she has not had in a long time, a sense of momentum, the intoxicating feeling that she is no longer just surviving storms but creating them. Together they are not reckless in the obvious way. They are worse. They are patient when patience is useful, intimate when intimacy creates leverage, and cold enough to know exactly which wounds to press. Their growing closeness becomes a spectacle whispered about in Port Charles, but what no one immediately grasps is that this is not merely a scandal in the making. It is the birth of a new axis of power, one rooted in pain, ambition, and mutually beneficial corruption. For Sidwell, Ava's presence becomes addictive because she does not ask him to become better. She does not ask him to heal, to forgive, or to rise above the darkness consuming him. She meets him there. She sits beside him inside the ugliness of his grief, and instead of pulling him back, helps him give it direction. That is more intimate than tenderness. It is a form of permission. Every time Ava validates his anger, every time she quietly reinforces his belief that Sonny deserves whatever is coming, Sidwell sinks deeper into a mindset where violence no longer feels like excess, but necessity. Marco's death becomes sacred in his mind, something that must be avenged not only for love but for identity. If he cannot protect his son, then he will prove he can still punish the world for taking him. This obsession begins to distort everything around him. He sleeps less. He listens more. He trusts less. He starts anticipating betrayal before it happens, and in doing so, becomes willing to preempt it with startling cruelty. Even those nominally on his side begin to sense that grief has made him more dangerous, not because he is irrational, but because he has become terrifyingly clear about what he wants. Ava, meanwhile, is undergoing her own transformation. What begins as sympathy slowly reveals itself as temptation. The closer she gets to Sidwell, the more she sees the possibilities opening in front of her. Windermere, influence, security, revenge, Avery, all of these separate desires begin folding into one vision of the future, and in that vision, Sonny is the obstacle that must be removed. Ava tells herself she is thinking like a mother, that every move she makes is ultimately for Avery's protection. There is truth in that, but it is not the whole truth. Ava also wants victory. She wants the satisfaction of taking from Sonny what he values most, while forcing him to watch himself lose control. She wants him cornered, furious, and too unstable to stop the collapse. That desire makes her more dangerous than even Sidwell realizes, because unlike him, Ava can still smile while planning devastation. She knows how to turn fear into theater, how to appear sympathetic while planting poison, how to make herself look like the rational one while quietly engineering emotional detonations all around her. Their relationship deepens, and the only way a bond like this can, through shared secrets and escalating risk. The line between alliance and passion begins to disappear. Grief and desire become tangled together until neither one of them can tell where strategy ends and genuine attachment begins. Ava is drawn to the version of Sidwell few others see, stripped down, wounded, burning with loss. Sidwell, in turn, becomes captivated by Ava's refusal to flinch. She does not recoil from his darkness. She studies it. She understands it. She even admires the force of it, because in her own way she has always been drawn to power at its most volatile. This attraction does not redeem either of them. It corrupts them further. Every private moment becomes another layer of trust, another excuse to move forward, another justification for choices that would have once seemed too extreme. Their chemistry turns into conspiracy. Their intimacy turns into ammunition. And the fallout for Sonny could be devastating. As Ava begins positioning herself for another custody battle, the timing is no accident. Sonny is already a man carrying too much pressure, too many enemies, too many fires burning at once. Sidwell intends to exploit that. He wants Sonny pushed beyond reason, forced into defensive moves that can be used against him publicly and legally. He wants whispers about danger around Avery to grow louder. He wants Sonny's name tied to violence, instability, and retaliation. He wants the city to start seeing Sonny not as a protector, but as a source of destruction. Ava can help create exactly that narrative. She knows which pressure points matter most, which fears Sonny hides, which emotional buttons he cannot help reacting to when Avery is involved. If she and Sidwell move in sync, Sonny will find himself attacked from multiple directions at once, emotionally, legally, socially, and perhaps physically. That is what makes this alliance so catastrophic. It is not a single strike, it is a campaign. Port Charles has seen dangerous couples before, but there is something especially bleak about Sidwell and Ava, because they are not driven by fantasy, they are driven by appetite sharpened by loss. Sidwell believes that if Sunny falls, Marco's death will finally mean something. Ava believes that if Sunny falls, Avery can finally be hers without compromise. Those are not fleeting emotions. Those are convictions, and convictions are far harder to stop than schemes born from greed alone. Around them, the city begins to feel the pressure without fully understanding its source. Old rivalries start intensifying. Loyalties begin to fracture. People who once believed they could remain neutral realize neutrality is disappearing. Because when Sidwell's need for revenge expands, and Ava's ambition locks into place beside it, Port Charles does not simply face another feud. It faces a spreading darkness with structure behind it. The most chilling part is that neither Sidwell nor Ava sees themselves as villains in this chapter. Sidwell sees himself as a father whose pain has finally burned away all illusions. Ava sees herself as a mother and survivor, taking back power in a world that has repeatedly tried to leave her with nothing. That self-justification is what will allow them to go further than anyone expects. They will not pause where others might. They will not stop simply because collateral damage grows. In their minds, the damage was already done to them first. Everything now is merely response. That twisted sense of righteousness gives their choices a frightening momentum, and once that momentum builds, even they may not be able to control where it ends. So as Port Charles drifts toward yet another storm, the real danger may not be any single act of violence, but the bond forming at the center of it all. Sidwell's obsession after Marco's death is no passing breakdown. It is the beginning of a darker purpose. Ava's growing attachment to him is no isolated romance. It is a strategic surrender to temptation, grief, and power. Together they are becoming more than allies, more than lovers, more than co-conspirators. They are becoming a force built from sorrow and calculation, one capable of redrawing the balance of fear in Port Charles. And if Sunny does not recognize the scale of that threat soon enough, he may discover too late that Marco's death was not the end of one tragedy. It was the beginning of a far greater one.